Let's try another example, looking at another example where we define our own functions and we try to understand what will be output. In essence here, we're trying to predict what the code will output, and then we can run the code to test our understanding, okay? So I'm assuming at this point you have tried to predict what this code will output and perhaps even run it yourself to verify that. Okay, so first question is, where do we start executing? Well, we want to look for the first line of code that's not indented and it doesn't begin with def. So that's going to be here on line 19. We're going to start here with double 5. Okay, so double 5. We're going to come up here. X is going to be equal to 5. It's going to return 2 times x, which means we are going to print, actually I probably don't need to put the comments in here. We are going to print the number 10. Okay, we'll go on to the next one, quad 4. Okay, quad 4, x equals 4. Now we're going to double 4, which gives us 8. And then we're going to double 8, which gives us 16. So quad 4, quadrupling 4 is going to give us 16. Now just because the name says we're going to double or quadruple something doesn't mean it will, right? We can have semantic bugs, we can have semantic errors. So we want to make sure that we always carefully check to ensure that the names do match what the code is doing. We can't just say quadrupling 4 is 16. We have to go and verify with how the quad method is function is implemented. Now we've got another function, hello Joe. Okay, so let's look at hello Joe and try and see what that's going to output. So if I say name equals Joe here, I'm going to print out hello Joe, how are you today? Then I'm going to print repeat hi 10. Okay, so my string is hi and n equals 10. And this is going to, in essence, say hi times 10. So it's returning that, but then I'm printing it. So I'm going to print out hi, 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 hi. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Awesome. And now finally, we have square, star, and 4. Okay, so let's try this out. So for I in range 4, it's going to be doing this 4 times. I'm going to print repeat string n. Aha, so I'm going to be using that repeat function we had before, which is going to have a star and a 4 repeated. So what in essence what I'm going to have is I'm going to have 1, 2, 3, 4 stars, but then I'm inside of a for loop that's going to execute 4 times. So I'm actually going to print. I'm going to be printing 4 lines of 4 stars each. Okay? And so I highly recommend, if you weren't able to correctly predict what this code will output, is to try it again. However, since you've seen the solutions now, it might be harder to kind of walk through and test your knowledge. So what I recommend you do is try tweaking and changing these examples slightly to further test yourself. So that's one of the best parts of learning to code, is that you can create infinitely many examples for yourself. Take an example, muck with it a little bit, and then see if you can correctly predict the output. And that's the acid test to determine if you really understand programming deeply enough. This is the target, is that for you to be able to predict what any code outputs. That's the level of understanding that we want to look for in these basic computer science courses. So let's go down to the questions. Okay, so what is def going to do? What does return do? So def allows us to define a new function. Return is going to allow us to pass a value back to where a function was called. So in some sense, you can almost think of it as almost a replacement. So for example, double 5 on line 19, that is going to get replaced by the value 10. The call to quad 4 is going to get replaced by the value 16. So that's specific to return. Now, a natural question that beginning programmers often have is, what's the difference between return and print? Well, when we return a value, we can then use it. So returned values can be used to print, store. They can be stored in variables and other variables, or used in calculations. Printing, however, can only be displayed to the screen. So let me just differentiate that a little bit. So print is only to the screen. It can't be used later on. So once we've printed something, its value is lost unless we keep it stored in a variable somewhere. So that's why most functions, so here, this would be the best practice. Would be to use return over print. So you really want to favor return over print. However, it's sometimes appropriate to print. So for example, we have this square function, and the goal of that square function is really to print. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. However, you can notice that in repeat, we're returning a string. We're not printing, and that allows us more flexibility. So you have to decide what makes sense in the particular instance that you're programming in. So let's deepen our understanding of our vocabulary, review that a little bit. So we've got formal parameters. Formal parameters show up in the def line. So these are the named parameters. In this case, we've got parameter names x, name, string, and n. The actual parameters are the actual values that are passed. So let me go back, actually. Let's highlight our formal parameters here so you can see exactly what I'm seeing. Okay, those are all our formal parameters. Then let's see what our actual parameters are. Our actual parameters are the values that are passed in. However, we can have nested functions too. So for example, that's an actual parameter, these are actual parameters, but this whole call here, repeat string n, is also an actual parameter. X is an actual parameter and double x is an actual parameter. Okay, so anything can be, just as 5 is an actual, so is double 5, so is quad, so is repeat. And so all of these parameters are actual parameters. Now, which functions are void functions? Well, void functions don't return anything. So void functions don't return. So that's the test that we use. They don't return anything. So it's possible for a void function to return, but it won't have a value after it. It would simply say return is okay here. But I typically don't return from void functions, at least in the code for this class. So the void functions are the ones that print instead of returning. And so in this case, it's hello and square. Now, last but not least, let's check out our fruitful functions. And our fruitful functions do return. So they return a value. So let's try this. We've got def double, def quad, and def repeat.